Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Citizen Promaster Eco Drive Diver reference BN0261-51E. This watch is widely available from your local Citizen stockist and from the official brand website citizenwatch.ie for €475. Citizen have a rich brand heritage and they first released the Promaster in 1989, so they've been producing Promaster pieces for the last 36 years. So firstly, let's look at the box that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the specifications of the piece. So the watch comes in a cardboard watch box, which is housed inside this outer black cardboard box. On the lid to the outer box we have the Citizen logo in silver, and also on the front edge of the flap to the lid. So I'll take out the watch box and show it to you. Cardboard watch box, matte black finish to it. On the lid we have the Citizen logo, and on the front edge of the base, so one removes the lid. And inside there's this block of foam which protects the watch in shipping from any damage. The base on the inside is upholstered with contrasting grey Bezel fabric to good standard, cut out in the centre, and that houses this piece of flexible metal which is also upholstered with grey Bezel fabric. This can be manipulated to suit larger or smaller bracelet sizes. It's a good snug fit in the base. Good presentation. Now, although it's basic, it does suffice in protecting it. And on the base, you can see it has this recyclable paper emblem, and also denotes that this is proudly made with recyclable paper. So this indicates that Citizen are conscientious with regards to using environmentally friendly packaging. However, at this price point, €475, I'd prefer to see a plastic or PU coated watch box, but this is subjective. Some collectors might like the use of environmentally friendly sustainable materials. With regards to items that come in the piece, it comes with this guarantee and watch care information leaflet, which is a fold out leaflet. On the first page it details the terms and conditions of the 5-year international guarantee, and I want to give due credit to Citizen here because this is a low tier piece, and to clarify, low tier is €0 to €500 price point. Therefore the industry standard, the mandatory international warranty period for low tier pieces, is 12 months. With mid-tier pieces between €500 and €5,000 respectively, the industry standard warranty period is 2 years respectively, and one really sees 5-year international warranties with high-tier pieces at the €10,000+ price point, such as Rolex. It's unprecedented and very unusual to see a low-tier piece at €475 covered by a 5-year international warranty. It does add value to the piece, and I want to give due credit to Citizen. So, to activate the 5-year international warranty, you simply go on the website citizenwatch.ie/guarantee to register the serial number of your piece, and that will activate the warranty from the date of purchase. On the right hand portion we have the case number, which is the serial number engraved into the case back, manufacturer's number, model number, date of purchase, retailer's name and address, country and owner's name. Now you can also fold out the leaflet. And this effectively is the owner's instruction manual detailing the operation of the movement, which is the Citizen caliber E16800M Eco Drive quartz. Also gives advice on operating the piece for the various water resistance ratings of their pieces, including their Divers 200M, which are Promaster pieces which meet the criteria of ISO 6425 in order to be allowed to print Divers 200M on the dial. So, very comprehensive, and it's good to see 5 years of international warranty, as I've detailed. And lastly, one also gets this cardboard tag, which has Citizen on it, and on the reverse it has the full reference number for the piece, also the caliber E168. There's also a QR code, which can be scanned with your Android or iPhone to download more information, and also the barcode for this version of the Promaster. So, with regards to the specifications of the piece, we have a 41mm case diameter. Now, the first thing I want to tell you is this version of the Promaster, the Eco Drive Diver, reference BN0261-51E, is available in the following colour options: black, blue, green, and also the green version is available in both gold and silver stainless steel versions. Of the colour options, I think this black version is the best looking. So we have a 41mm case diameter, we have a lug-to-lug measurement of 47.4mm, a thickness of 11.8mm, and a lug width of 20mm. The bracelet tapers from 20mm at the lugs down to 18mm at the flip lock micro adjustment clasp. So flip lock is signed with Citizen's logo engraved with high definition engraving. 2 button push triggers to the flip lock clasp, and also we have a second pair on the flanks of the micro adjustment clasp which activates or deploys the micro adjustment. So one presses in the 2 pushers on the flanks, and that deploys it. And as you can see, we have a full 20mm of micro adjustment. Flip lock is well executed. There's a scallop beneath the flip lock for one's index fingernail or thumbnail, and the 2 button push triggers are correctly proportioned on the left and right hand flanks. Solid MIL 316L grade stainless steel internals, and on the underside you can see the ratcheting mechanism with 20mm on the fly adjustment. This is excellent. This is a credible tool watch, a proper 200m dive piece which meets the criteria of ISO 6425, because this has enough micro adjustment to fit around a wetsuit. So excellent to see 20mm, and it works very well. You press in the 2 button push triggers and it closes back up and also deploys fully with a nice positive sliding action. So excellent ratcheting mechanism. So we have a flat sapphire crystal with clear AR coating on the underside, and the clear anti-reflective coating does an outstanding job of reducing the glare and the highly reflective nature of the silver mirror polished handset, and also the silver mirror polished applied indices. Indices are correctly proportioned, and again they meet the criteria of this piece being ISO 6425. Criteria met, because you can see the proportions are excellent, legibility is excellent, and it's fully lumed with C3 Superlume Nova on the lume pip, on the bezel, and also the indices and the handset. So the arrow hand is skeletonized, but we have an arrowhead style minutes hand, and it's easy to differentiate between the syringe skeletonized arrow hand and the arrow style minutes hand. Also lume pip on the second hand. What I like about the proportions of the handset is they are correctly proportioned for the diameter of the dial, and the double applied indices at 12 o'clock give good orientation to the dial. One can immediately identify where 12 o'clock is on the dial because of the double indices, and then we've got single indices or indexes at 9 and 6 o'clock respectively. So legibility is good, and I like the layout of the dial. It's very clean. The dial is a sunray black finish. Now subjectively I personally think this would look more aesthetically pleasing with a glossy enamel black finish versus being sunray, but this is subjective because I appreciate some collectors like sunray black dials. This is available in alternative sunray versions, as I've detailed: sunray black, sunray blue, sunray green, and the green version is available in both silver and gold cases. But of the colour options, this black sunray version is the best. What I like about the dial is it's not overbranded with unnecessary text or specification. It simply has the Citizen text logo at 12 o'clock, and then Eco Drive with the Eco Drive emblem, or sorry, Promaster emblem, and then we also have Divers 200M. Now, the thing I most like about it is the use of Divers 200M as per the Seiko SKX 007. It's important because in order for a dive piece to be allowed to print Divers 200M on the dial, as per the SKX 007, the watch has to meet the criteria of ISO 6425. So for example, the Seiko 5KX cannot have Divers 200M printed on the dial because of course it's only 100 meters with a push-pull crown versus the screw-down crown of the SKX 007. So the SKX 007 meets the criteria of ISO 6425, therefore Seiko were allowed to print Divers 200M. Same applies to Citizen with this Promaster, because it's 200 meters with a screw down crown versus 100 meters with a push-pull crown, therefore Citizen are allowed to print Divers 200M on the dial at 6. So nice to see that, because it confirms this meets the criteria of ISO 6425. So very well executed dial. Quality of the white minute ticks on the chapter ring are excellent. Legibility is good because we've got larger square white squares next to the indices for the hour markers, and then the white minute ticks are smaller, more slender. So legibility is good. This is a credible dive piece, a proper tool watch that meets the criteria of ISO 6425, and I really like the aesthetic of the aluminium bezel insert and the aggressive gear tooth bezel. So fantastic dial execution. Date complication is clearly legible and framed in white, and I like that they've been able to fit in a square index next to the right hand side of the white framing. So again, legibility is enhanced, and we'll show that in the lume test. Bezel is solid 316L grade stainless steel. Gear tooth profile, and I really like it. This makes a refreshing change from the usual default option of a scalloped bezel, alternatively coin edge bezel. This gear tooth bezel is high profiled, but the benefit is, although it does project above the flat sapphire crystal and does a good job of protecting it, the point is it doesn't add too much thickness to this piece. This piece is surprisingly low profile, and that's the benefit of it being Eco Drive quartz powered. It's only 11.8 millimeters, even though it's 200 meters. So it's got a tall profile to the bezel, but that actually reduces the visual impact of the flanks of the case. The case is slender, the flanks are low profile, they're not tall and slab-sided as per Tudor Black Bay heritage, but we've got this tall gear tooth bezel, and it really does give the piece a military issued or tool watch aesthetic. It's rather like the gear tooth bezel used on the CWC RN Diver, and I like that gear tooth profiling to it. It's just fantastic. So excellent finish to it. It's brush satin finish to the gear teeth, but also on the top edge we've got a large chamfer which deletes the sharp tips of the gear teeth, and it's beautiful, just fantastic the way it's finished with the brush satin finishing. Now, subjectively, one can be critical of the use of an aluminium bezel insert because, of course, it's a given. Had they used a sapphire crystal bezel insert or alternatively ceramic bezel insert, which are the two industry standards, the alternatives, they are harder and more scratch resistant. Aluminium, of course, does look aesthetically pleasing. It gives the piece a vintage aesthetic, rather like a 1980s or 1990s piece, which predated the use of sapphire crystal and ceramic, respectively, which are now the industry standards in 2025. I like the aesthetic of the aluminium bezel insert. First 20-minute ticks are indexed, and then we've also got hour markers and then large silver Arabic numerals. The font is clearly legible for 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50, and I like the quality of the anodizing to the aluminium bezel insert. Yes, aluminium bezel inserts are not as hard and scratch resistant, but I would argue the benefit is, from an aesthetic point of view, they patinate. So in time, the anodizing fades with ultraviolet light, and also it wears, and one gets this aesthetically pleasing faded bezel, or ghosted bezel as they're referred to. So in time this is going to patinate and develop a patina, and I like ghosted bezels which go from black anodized glossy finish to a lighter grey silver anthracite tone, and I don't regard scuffs and scratches to aluminium bezel inserts to be detrimental. I think they add character to a piece, and I like to see patination on a vintage dive piece, for example. That's something one doesn't get, patination, with sapphire bezel inserts and also ceramic bezel inserts, because in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, etc., sapphire crystal and ceramic does not patinate. So it's not going to fade with ultraviolet light exposure, and with daily wear and tear, it's not going to fade, it's not going to wear and look lighter as per a faded ghosted bezel. That's the point I'm making. So the aluminium bezel insert, although it's not scratch resistant, it does look aesthetically pleasing, and I like the silver, the way it contrasts with the glossy black anodized finish. What I like about the bezel insert and the bezel is it's slightly higher profile than the flat sapphire crystal. So this is beneficial because this is the way it should be. Often with dive pieces, they will have a box top hat crystal or alternatively double dome sapphire crystal. And of course the sapphire crystal projects above the bezel and the bezel insert. The purpose of a bezel on a tool watch or a dive piece is to protect the sapphire crystal from impact damage and of course being scuffed and scratched. This does it correctly because you can see the tall profile of the gear tooth stainless steel bezel is tall, so it projects above the flat sapphire crystal, and the aluminium bezel insert, although it's beveled rather than just being flat, it does slightly project above the top surface of the sapphire crystal. So the aluminium bezel insert does actually project above, so there is a lip around it, and of course this is beneficial because it prevents the sapphire crystal itself from being scuffed and scratched. The bezel will become scuffed and scratched, but it protects the sapphire crystal from being scuffed and scratched, but it's still only 11.8. So to clarify, the thickness of the piece to the top of the sapphire crystal is 11.5, but the thickness of the piece to the top of the aluminium bezel insert in the bezel is 11.8. So the sapphire crystal is sunk beneath the aluminium bezel insert by 0.3 millimeters. So there's 0.3 millimeters of projection on the bezel insert protecting it. That's how it should be. And of course it's still very low profile at only 11.8. Case is solid 316L grade stainless steel, longitudinally brush satin finished on the top of the lugs. Then we've got these large mirror polished bevels which run from the tip of the lug to the tip of the lug on the flanks. The transitions have this beautiful mirror polished bevel, and I really like it. The case shape reminds me of my Submariner Dates 16610. It's got that kind of tapered lug and also the pointed crown guards which are mirror polished on the top, and they flow nicely into the bevels on the edge of the transitions. Excellent. Visually it reduces the impact, but also in terms of aesthetics it makes the lugs look nice and slender. So although it is a 41mm case, it actually looks and wears more like a 40 due to the taper on the lugs, the large mirror polished bevels and the pointed crown guards. Very aesthetically pleasing case shape. Does remind me of my Submariner Dates 16610. So, case is longitudinally brushed satin finish on the flanks, beautiful fine grained satin finishing, excellent quality brushed satin finishing, excellent quality mirror polishing. On the undercuts to the flanks, it's got a large bevel which is mirror polished, and that deletes the sharp edge on the undercuts. This enhances comfort level and feel good factor both on the left and the right hand flanks. Also on the underside of the crown guards they have bevels that deletes the sharp tips of the pointed crown guard. So case finishing is fantastic. What I like about the case is it's very slender. It's a very low profile 41mm, so I'll show you this in the wrist shots, but it doesn't have tall, thick slab sides. Although they are flat profiled versus being convex profiled, what I like is the flanks are not tall and slab sided as per Tudor Black Bay Heritage or Black Bay 58, which you'll all be familiar with. They're very slender. Large undercut deletes some of the meat, but also the large mirror polished bevels on the top edge, which is the transition. That makes it visually look very slender. As you can see, it's rather like a Rolex Submariner date flanks to the case, so very nicely proportioned. So we have a flat link bracelet, as you can see. The centre section of it has bevels which are machined on the edges of the centre squares or the centre links, and the bevels are mirror polished to perfection. So flat link bracelet is very well finished, beautiful lustre to it, male end links, no sharp edge to the top edge or the lower edge of the flanks, doesn't pull arm hairs, and it's correctly proportioned. However, I would prefer to see more taper on the bracelet. For example, this is a 41, so the industry standard is 22 to 18. The alternative industry standard is the perfection personified 20 to 16 taper, which I often refer to. For a 39 or 40 head of the piece, 20 to 16 is the perfect taper. For a larger piece such as this at 41, one would expect a 22 to 18. Citizen have chosen a less popular taper, which is more slight, which is 20 to 18. So 22 to 18 I think would look better, because if they enlarge the lug width from 20 to 22, that would visually reduce the impact of the lugs. They would look more slender visually, that's the point I'm making, with a 22 lug width. And of course, a 22 to 18 is a more aggressive taper. This looks more straight and parallel, but however, I am going to be subjective here because I appreciate some collectors prefer a more straight and parallel bracelet, rather like the Omega Seamaster, because of course that has a straight parallel bracelet. It doesn't taper as per Rolex Submariner date, which has 20 to 16, for example. So I think 22 to 18 will look better, but there is enough meat on the bracelet to balance the head of the piece. And of course we do have the micro adjustment clasp, which is solid milled 316L grade stainless steel. So bracelets and clasps do balance the head of the piece. It doesn't feel top heavy. I just think visually it would look better with more taper. Again, subjectively, I would prefer to see female putter end links, because this would be beneficial particularly for collectors with a smaller 6 to 7 inch wrist size, because it does have a very good lug-to-lug. It's 47.4, so it's only 0.6mm below the 48mm sweet spot. You'll know that from my previous reviews. 48 is the perfect sweet spot, so we're only 0.6 below that, but this would really benefit 6 to 7 inch wrists, because female putter end links would allow the end link in the flat link bracelet to pivot beneath the tips of the lugs. This can't do it because we've got the male end link with this large rectangular slab in the centre of the male end link. If they put a line across it to make it a female putter end link, of course then one would get the benefit of the end link in the bracelet pivoting beneath the tips of the lugs. Therefore it would close up the gap for smaller wrists. At 47.4 it is compact enough to close up the gap. On my large 8 inch wrist, I'll show you in the wrist shot, it does fit to perfection, but for 6 to 7 they could enhance it and reduce the visual impact of this large slab or rectangle in the centre of the end link, but it does suffice. So let's check the articulation. Male end link articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, that's a benefit. Doesn't have excess longitudinal, lateral, side or up and down play. Interference friction fit is good. Let's check the bracelet articulation. Links articulate freely, they don't feel stiff or kink, it's a nice fluid bracelet. Excellent. Let's check the other side of continuity. Again, end link articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, doesn't have excess longitudinal, lateral, side or up and down play. Let's check the bracelet. Fluid bracelet, articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink. Now, push pins in the bracelet are a clear production cost-cutting measure. However, one has to be magnanimous because this is a low-tier piece. It is acceptable to use push pins in the low tier. And to remind you and clarify, low tier is €0 to €500. However, we are at the upper end of low tier at €475. 500 is the limit and then it becomes mid-tier. But push pins are acceptable. I do like the use of double push pins versus singles because visually it does look aesthetically pleasing, having these pairs of holes drilled in the flanks, and of course the double pins are more secure than single pins, so it's good. It's not sloppy, it doesn't rattle, it doesn't have excess play. Yes, it's not as tight, the tolerances aren't as tight as 1.2mm or 1.6mm screw pins, that's a given, but one has to be magnanimous. That's just the style of this flat link bracelet. It does have large gaps in between each of the links. Visually it's good, because it reduces the visual impact of the flat link bracelet, and I like the centre section. The centre links are raised, and therefore it doesn't just look like a pure flat link bracelet. We do have some interest to it because the profiling of the centre links with the bevels projects above it, and then when it opens you can see the mirror polished bevels on the edges of the outer links and the edges of the centre link. So it's actually a very well finished bracelet for this price point. Comfort level and feel good factor are good because no sharp edges on the top edge or the low edge, and again it doesn't pull arm hairs. They've done a good job of it. So let's look at the clasp in detail. So 2-button push flip lock clasp, which again meets the criteria of ISO 6425. This is a credible dive piece with a proper flip lock clasp. So excellent sear flip lock. Scallop underneath it is good. 2-button push triggers give it security. And I'm pleased to see Citizen haven't used the production cost cutting measure of a pressed internals to the solid milled 316L grade stainless steel clasp. This is a proper milled clasp. Nice heavy gauge to it. They've done a good job of the luster, beautiful luster to the top side, underside and flanks. However, I'm going to be critical of one thing. I'm often critical of this with low tier and mid tier brands, and I level the same criticism at Hanhardt because they also make this mistake. Stainless steel is engraved upside down, it's inverted. Now the engraving is high definition and it's sharp, so that's good, but the reason why I'll clarify it's upside down. The majority of collectors are right-handed and therefore they wear the piece on their left wrist. So this is the orientation. This is the way up they wear the watch, on the left wrist. And then the collector takes the watch off the wrist and rotates it around like so. That's the orientation. And then you open the flip lock with your thumbnail, and then with your index finger and thumb with your right hand, because you're right-handed, press the two triggers and open it from left to right. So this is now the correct orientation for the majority of right-handed collectors wearing a piece on their left hand. I've now clarified it. But you can now see stainless steel is now upside down. It needs to be inverted. This is a fundamental error, and this is something that Citizen could quite easily correct because they simply engrave it the other way up. Hanhardt also made the mistake, and a plethora of other low tier and mid tier brands and micro brands make this mistake. They engrave stainless steel in the internals upside down, so they simply need to invert it. But with regards to finishing, no sharp edge to the top edge or the lower edge of the flank. Centre section doesn't have any sharp corners, that's good. Beautiful luster to it, and I like the proportions of it. Good curvature for 6 to 7 inch wrists, good curvature for 7 to 8 inch wrists respectively, and 20mm on the fly adjustment is excellent. It will fit around a wetsuit. So again, it's a credible ISO 6425 dive piece. Snap sharp with a nice positive click. Flip lock gives security. It's excellent. I like it. Now, let's check the articulation of the hinge pins. Left-hand hinge pin articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink. Does have slight play, but it's acceptable, it's not excessive. Let's check the centre hinge pin. Again, articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink. Minimal play, excellent. Finally, right-hand hinge pin, which is actually a spring bar. Articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, doesn't have excess play. Good. So, left-hand, centre and right-hand hinge pin aren't sloppy, don't have excess longitudinal, lateral, side-to-side or up and down play. Tolerances are interference, friction, fit, as they should be. Doesn't pull arm hairs, no sharp edges, no sharp corners, nice heavy gauge to it. I'm pleased to see it's not a pressed internal. We have solid milled 316L grade stainless steel. Good. So, let's check the micro adjustment. So 2-button push triggers are correctly proportioned on the left and right hand flanks. Pressing it in, nice firm resistance, so it feels reliable and robust. Beautiful luster to the extension, as you can see. And this is a very long extension or deployments. You can see 20mm, plenty of adjustment. And it's got a nice ratcheting mechanism, so it deploys smoothly when you press the two triggers. And then it clicks in with nice positive indexing. Good, heavy, solid clicks, but feels smooth. Doesn't feel rough or gritty. Doesn't feel too stiff. When it's fully closed to its minimum, doesn't rattle. Tolerances are good. Let's check it when it's fully deployed. Again, surprisingly good. The tolerances are good. The dimensions are correct. So they've got the width of it, the tolerance is correct, to the internal dimension of the body. So the point is, it doesn't have play, it's not sloppy. Even on full extension, and it does have a lot of extension, 20mm here, but you can see, it doesn't rattle. It also has slight play up and down, but it's not excessive. So this is a pleasant surprise, because often this style of ratcheting micro adjustment mechanism does have excess play, but it actually feels very good. This is very good from Citizen, and they deserve credit because this is not a sloppy ratcheting micro adjustment class. It actually feels very smooth. I'm impressed by the refinement of it, because I would expect this to have excess play. I thought it was going to be sloppy and rattle. It actually feels very smooth. This works very well. So one can quickly deploy it to fit around a wetsuit, and of course this also allows for on-the-fly adjustment when one is active and one's wrist swells up in warmer weather, and it's just very good. Clicks in with nice positive clicks, plenty of adjustment. I like the smoothness of it, surprisingly good. And the thing I like about it is the body of it is pressed, but the actual internals are solid mill 316L grade stainless steel, but it is surprisingly low profile, bearing in mind it has a large amount of adjustment, 20mm. But this is actually a low profile clasp, doesn't have too much heft, it's not too bulky, but it feels reliable and robust. That's the point. Beautiful luster to it. They've done a good job of the finishing. No sharp edges to the undercuts, no sharp corners, doesn't have a sharp edge to the top edge or the lower edge, and it's been very well finished with a beautiful luster, so I like it. So let's test the bezel and crown execution. So it may come as a surprise to you, but this has a 60 click unidirectional bezel versus the industry standard 120 click. 120 click is now the industry standard for dive pieces in 2025. We are all familiar with that. Originally, dive pieces, for example, in the 1960s and 1970s, they predated the use of click springs and ratcheting mechanisms. So dive watch bezels were friction based, and they had an octagonal or dodecagon profile to the wire, and the tension wire or spring beneath the bezel that provided the friction, the corners or the angles. And then what happened is in the 1980s onwards, 60 click unidirectional bezels became the industry standard, with a click spring engaging in grooves machined into the underside of the stainless steel bezel that we're all familiar with, and then that was succeeded in the 1990s by 120 click unidirectional bezels, which have now become the industry standard. But 60 click is really a vintage aesthetic. It gives this piece the look and the feel of a 1980s or 1990s bezel versus 2025. I would prefer 120 click bezel because that's now the industry standard. The other reason is it's smoother. This is not as smooth as a Tudor Pelagos 60 click bezel, that's a given, but one has to be magnanimous because this is €475. It's a low tier piece. We're not looking at a Pelagos, which is a mid tier piece. So they could change it. The other alternative for bezels, and this is often used with bidirectional GMT bezels, is they drill holes in the case, for example at 12, 9, 6 and 3, 4 holes, and then they put stainless steel springs in the holes, and then on top of the stainless steel springs they have stainless steel ball bearings, and the ball bearings engage in the grooves machined into the underside of the bezel, and then one can have a bidirectional GMT bezel, for example. And ball bearing bezels give smoother action, rather like a GMT bezel used on the Rolex GMT Master 2, for example, versus the click spring method, which feels more gritty, more rough, but that's what is used on the majority of dive pieces. But that's bezel execution for you. So 60 click feels surprisingly smooth. Now it's not as smooth as a 120 click bezel, that's a given. It does feel like a 60 click bezel. It's not rough or gritty. Medium resistance. In terms of the resistance, it feels balanced. It doesn't get lighter or heavier, and it feels similar in resistance to a Seiko 5KX, which I actually like because it's got that medium firm resistance. Doesn't feel as light as a San Martin SN017G or a Steel Dive SD 1953, which are lighter. Does feel similar to a 5KX. Feels heavier than a Rolex Submariner date, for example my Starbucks 16610. But I like the resistance, which is very similar to a 5KX or SKX007 if you're familiar with that. No lateral side-side play whatsoever. No back play, so it's nice and tight. It's surprisingly tight in terms of execution or play, but the resistance feels medium, rather than being too firm as per a Steinhardt Ocean 139, which is too stiff. So they've got the balance correct. I would just prefer it if it were 120 versus 60, because then it would be smoother. With the larger gaps in between the grooves, you can feel the click spring engaging. Now it is positive, it is solid, so it feels reliable and robust. I have no concerns about the durability of it with daily wear and tear. 60 click bezels are just as reliable as 120 click. The only difference is the grooves are machined further apart, and of course the click spring therefore has a louder click, it's audible, and also feels heavier because you've got that larger gap in between each of the clicks. But Once you become accustomed to it, actually feels good. So I like it, although I would prefer 120. The 60 clicks feel even, all the way through the 360 degrees. No back play whatsoever, no lateral side-to-side play. Let's just check the alignment finally. The recessed Lume pip inside the silver triangle. One more click. Perfect. So the Lume pip perfectly aligns and the triangle perfectly aligns with the 12 o'clock double indices and also the 60-minute tick on the chapter ring. Perfect alignment. This is perfect bezel execution, and I'm very pleased with the quality control because the alignment is correct, no back play, no lateral side-to-side play, and even all the way through the 360 degrees. It's equal quality and equal in feeling to a Seiko 5KX, and I really like the balance of it. Medium firm. Right, so let's look at the case back in detail, and then I'll check the crown execution. Solid 316L grade stainless steel case back. So again, provides an effective hermetic seal to 200 meters, therefore meets the criteria of ISO 6425 versus a pressed on case back or a screw down case back with only 100 meters. And we've got milled slots, which are deburred very well, so no sharp edges to the milled slots. Concentric CNC lathe tool machining refracts the light rather than reflecting it like a mirror, as per a sterile Rolex or Tudor case back, which are mirror polished. I really like the concentric CNC lathe tool machining because you can see it's beautiful luster, but it refracts the light rather than reflecting it. Around the circumference is engraved with the specification, reference number of the piece, and it confirms it's 200 meters water resistant, which is excellent. Male end links are a good tight fit to the underside to the head of the piece. Now, the negative is they use standard stainless steel spring bars. I'd prefer to see Citizen upgrade this to quick release stainless steel spring bars because in the absence of pierced lugs, holes in the flanks, one cannot depress the spring bar externally with the spring bar tool through the lugs. So quick release stainless steel spring bars would therefore be beneficial. It is okay because one can easily engage a spring bar tool because the slots are large enough for a two-pronged fork for a spring bar tool, but of course quick release stainless steel spring bars would negate the need for a spring bar tool, therefore they would be beneficial. Beautiful luster to the end links, and the end links are a good tight fit to the head of the piece. Underside to the head of the piece is concentric CNC lathe tool machined. Beautiful luster to it, large mirror polished bevels on the transitions, which is good. And we've also got large bevels on the tips of the lugs, which deletes the sharp corners. This enhances comfort level and feel good factor. So what I like about it is case back is very flat. It's not a deep bubble back case back. So for example, compare this to an NH35A automatic powered piece with a deep bubble back case back and 200 meters. That would make this piece much thicker. This is the benefit of it being quartz powered by the Citizen Caliber E16800M Eco Drive quartz, because it's a thin caliber, and of course this piece is only 11.8 as a result, even though it is 200 meters water resistant. So it's very flat. That's the point I'm making. The benefit is this makes the head of the piece sit very snug to the wrist, enhances comfort level and feel good factor, feels perfectly smooth, doesn't feel rough or sharp. The engraving is very well done. And I like it. Looks good, feels good. Very low profile, 200 meters is strong specification, and it's nice and flat. And that's the benefit of this being quartz powered versus being an automatic. Right, so let's test the screw down crown execution. Solid 316L grade stainless steel screw down crown, coin edge finish. Now, I'm going to be critical of the coin edge finishing. So why so? Well, when I say critical, the quality of the machining of the coin edge teeth is good. It's high definition, no sharp edges because there's a large chamfer which deletes the sharp tips. So the quality is there. But I'm critical of the choice because gear tooth profile bezel. Now, to clarify why I'm critical, there should always be continuity of design of the elements. So with a knurled bezel, that matches with a scalloped bezel, a knurled crown matches as per the Rolex Submariner dates. For example, with a coin edge bezel, as per the Tudor Black Bay 58, it should have a coin edge crown because coin edge bezel matches coin edge crown, scalloped bezel matches a knurled crown respectively. That's the point I'm making. What we have here is a clash because we've got an aggressive gear tooth bezel, which is aesthetically pleasing, but we've got a finer coin edge crown. Now, if this had a coin edge bezel, of course the coin edge crown would match because fine coin edge teeth on both places. This should have either a gear tooth profile to the crown to match, alternatively a knurled crown because knurled crowns go with gear tooth. So scalloped bezel goes with a knurled crown, coin edge bezel goes with a coin edge crown, and when one has a gear tooth crown, one really has the option of a gear tooth bezel, one has the option of a gear tooth crown or knurled, but coin edge really doesn't match. It looks too fine. The point is the coin edge teeth look too fine for the aggressive profile of the gear tooth. But this is subjective. I appreciate for the majority of collectors this is not detrimental, and they find a coin edge crown to be aesthetically pleasing. Yes, it is well done. It's greatly proportioned. On a positive note, I do like the pointed profiling of the pointed lugs, which is rather like a Rolex Submariner Date 16610 case shape. And it flows nicely. The crown guards flow very well into the bevels on the transition. So proportions of the crown guards are good. I just prefer to see it if it were knurled or alternatively gear tooth. That's the point I'm making. Mirror polished domed cap. And of course it's engraved with the Promaster emblem to a good standard. So let's test the execution. 200 meters of hermetic seal meets the criteria of ISO 6425, which is excellent. Silky smooth. This is sublime screw down crown execution. Minimal number of turns required to fully unscrew it. What I like about it is the smoothness. There's a perfect interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. So to clarify, there are two rubber O-ring gaskets, one rubber O-ring gasket seal inside the stainless steel crown tube and a second rubber O-ring gasket seal inside the crown, and the two hermetic seals provide 200 meters and therefore meet the criteria of ISO 6425. So this is a proper screw down crown, not a pushable crown as used on the 5KX with 100 meters, for example. Excellent, silky smooth, perfect interface. So putting it out to the first click position is the quick set date complication. And when one rotates the crown anti-clockwise, that advances the quick sets. So it clicks over with a nice light click. It's not loud and audible as per an NH35A. Feels similar to a Miyota 2115 quartz as used in the Casio Joro, which we're all familiar with. That's the feeling of it. So it feels lighter than an NH35A, a 9015 or an SW200-1. Very similar to 2115 quartz. Also feels similar to the light quick set action of a Miyota 8215 or 8315, which are automatics, but it's got that kind of light clicking sensation. Alignment is correct. Both the single and the double abric numerals align correctly in the framed white date window. So aperture is large enough. One has to be magnanimous because it's a characteristic of eco-drive eco-drive pieces. They do have a thick dial, and of course that does add some depth to the date window. The date wheel is sunk slightly deeper beneath a thicker dial. That's just the way it is with eco-drive pieces like this. So there is more of a shadow cast around the white dates with black abric numerals than with a thinner dial. The dial is not textured as per a textured dial, so therefore that isn't the reason for the thickness, but albeit it's smooth, it's sunray black versus textured. The dial is not a sandwich dial, the indices are applied, but we do have some extra depth to it. So you can see the aperture or the cutout is the correct size, but we do have a slight shadow cast due to the depth of it. That's the point of making, the thickness of the dial. But Arabic numerals, singles and doubles are correctly proportioned. Font is sharp, it's high definition and crisp. It's not too thick, it's not too blurry, and one can easily read the single and the double Arabic numerals. What I like about it is the alignment. The single and double Arabic numerals aren't too far to the left or the right of the white framing, and they're not too high or too low, so they're bang on the centre, and it's good. One can easily read it. Pulling it out to the second click hacks the movement. So if you look at the second hand, you can see it's now stopped dead, so therefore it's possible to set the time precisely to the second with this Citizen Caliber E16800M Eco Drive Quartz. So now in the time setting position. Feels smooth. Very light resistance, feels very similar to a Miyota 2115, which you may be familiar with, as I've detailed, that's used in the Casio Joro. Feels similar to the resistance or the smoothness of a Miyota 8215 or 8315. Lighter than an NH35A and an H38, lighter than an SW200-1 and a 9015, which you may be familiar with. It's got that kind of light feeling to it. And I like the smoothness of it. It doesn't feel stiff, doesn't feel rough or gritty as per a PT5000. It does feel refined. And I really like the smoothness of the E16800M. It's got that smooth feeling. There is minimal backplay. So in terms of backplay, it's similar to an NH35A. It's also similar to a 2115. And also an 8215 or an 8315. And I would say it does have more backplay than an SW200-1, P024 or an ETA 2824-2. But once you become accustomed to it, rotating the coin edge crown clockwise or anti-clockwise to take up the slack in the gearing it's actually not detrimental. It's just a characteristic of the caliber E16800M Eco Drive quartz. So the back play isn't excessive. It's no more than a 2115, and I think it's okay once you become used to it. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click, and then restarts the movement. You can see the second hand begins to tick around the dial once again. So let's test screwing the crown back down. Instant thread pickup, perfect interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube. This is silky smooth, sublime screw down crown execution, and very impressive at €475 price point in the low tier. Yes, we're at the upper end of the low tier, 0 to 500, but this is fantastic. This is mid-tier screw down crown execution. It's as silky smooth as a Tudor Black Bay 58 crown. To put it into perspective, it's very smooth. What I like about it is the thread pickup, the mating of the threads, the interface, because when you screw the crown down, it picks up first time every single time, 10 out of 10 times. You don't need to rotate the crown anti-clockwise and clockwise over and over again in order to get the threads to pick up, to get them to mate. The threads pick up first turn every single time. So the build quality, quality control, materials and finishing are outstanding. It's something that Citizen do very well on the Promaster. And to remind you, Citizen released the first Promaster in 1989. They've been making Promaster pieces for 36 years, an incredibly long production run. And what we're looking at here is peak Citizen Promaster, the very best of Citizen. The screw down crown on this Promaster fully backs up 36 years of quality control. It's stellar, very silky smooth, so very pleasing to use. Right, so I'll give you a wrist shot, just bear with me, I'll remove my Concord 40. Now, I haven't sized the bracelet, and I'm pleased to report that this fits my 8-inch wrist to perfection with the micro adjustment clasp on its minimum. So without sizing, I can easily close it, snap shut with a nice positive click, flip lock, second positive click, and I can indeed slide an index finger beneath the bracelet and clasp at all times. This is the correct bracelet sizing method. I often refer to this in my previous reviews, but I'll reiterate it for the benefit of those of you that have not heard it. The reason why an index finger beneath a bracelet and clasp is the correct sizing method, regardless of whether a bracelet is flat link, Jubilee style, oyster style or beads of rice style respectively, is because it allows for wrist expansion in warmer weather or when one is active. So one index finger is effectively an extra link of expansion, and therefore when the wrist swells up, the bracelet is never going to be too tight. The reason why that's beneficial is not just for comfort level, but it also reduces the shear load on the pins, regardless of whether they are push pins or screw pins, because if a bracelet is sized too tight on the wrist and the wrist swells up, and that puts the pins under excess shear load. And what that does is that exacerbates the wear on the pins. What happens is the pins are put under excess shear load, they become ovalized, and of course the holes which they go through in the links also become ovalized, and the excess shear load eventually causes metal fatigue, and what happens is the pins weaken and therefore they fail, they shear. So bracelet breaks, and then of course piece falls on the ground, becomes damaged. So it's actually detrimental to have a bracelet sized too tight, but by having an index finger, one link of extension or expansion if you like, that reduces the shear load on the push pins or the screw pins. That's why I always refer to it. So this is now sized correctly. It's able to float up and down the wrist, and of course when my wrist swells up I have that expansion room. But we also have 10mm on the fly adjustment, and pressing in the 2 button push triggers will deploy the extension. So fits my wrist to perfection as it stands, 8 inches. So to clarify, there are enough removable links on the 6 and the 12 o'clock side of the bracelet to size this down to a minimum 6 up to a maximum 8. This will actually fit up to 8.5, as you can see. And again, we have the 20mm on the fly adjustment. So this would easily fit around a wetsuit, for example, even if you have a large 8-inch plus wrist size. Plenty of adjustment. The other thing I like about it is they've also included a half link on the 6 and a half link on the 12 o'clock side of the bracelet. Citizen deserve credit. They've made the correct decision here, because this is often something that low tier and mid tier brands and micro brands get incorrect. It's a fundamental. With a flat link bracelet, and the same applies to other styles such as beads of rice style, oyster style and Jubilee style respectively, but with a flat link bracelet, often brands will only have a full link on the 6 and a full link on the 12 side of the bracelet. And the problem with that is sometimes adding or subtracting one full link from a flat link bracelet doesn't give the desired fits, because the bracelet will either be slightly too tight or slightly too loose. So therefore it's beneficial to have a half link on the 6 and a half link on the 12 side, because for example if you need to delete one full link, you can remove a half plus a half to make the one full link, and then that retains. The clasp will always be central on the wrist, not offset too far to the 6 or offset too far to the 12. Bang on the centre. Visually it looks aesthetically pleasing, but also fits better. So citizens deserve credit, because half link does give perfect fits, and of course we do have 20mm on the fly adjustment. Curvature is good, as I've detailed. It's not too thick, it's not too large, it's not too bulky, even though it does have very large amounts of 20mm of adjustment. But even for a smaller 6 to 7 inch wrist, curvature is good. It's not too long. It's not going to have overhang on a 6 to 7 inch wrist. On my 8 inch wrist, you can see, fits it to perfection, not too bulky, very aesthetically pleasing, beautiful luster to it, has enough meat to have heft, feels quality, but not too bulky, doesn't feel too heavy, and it does balance the head of the piece very well. I would prefer the 2216 Perfection Personified Taper, or the alternative industry standard 22-18, as I've detailed, to reduce the visual impact, because this straight bracelet, although it does add meat to it and does balance the head of the piece, I think the taper is not aggressive enough. 20-18 is not as popular, but subjectively some collectors will prefer it. Beautiful luster to the flat link bracelet with the bevels, and I like the centre section links are raised. Fantastic looking. Comfort level is sublime. No sharp edges, doesn't pull arm hairs, articulates freely, beautiful luster to it, great looking. So, what I like about it, two things above all else. Firstly, lack of depth, the height. This is only 11.8. Now just think about that for a moment. This is an ISO criteria met piece, ISO 6425, 200 meters, screw down case back, screw down crown. If this were automatic, for example, if it were powered by the NH35A, it would be 13 plus, as one would expect, even with a flat sapphire crystal. This is only 11.8. So citizens deserve credit, because they fully optimised or fully maximised the benefits of this being quartz powered by the Citizen Caliber E16800M Eco Drive. It's a thin caliber. We're not looking at 13 here. 11.8 millimeters. It's very flat, it's very low profile. And again, they deserve credit for selecting the correct choice of a flat sapphire crystal. And to remind you, the flat sapphire crystal is recessed 0.3mm below the top of the aluminium bezel inserts. So the thickness to the top of the sapphire crystal is only 11.5, but to the top of the aluminium bezel insert is 11.8. So the crystal is recessed by 0.3, but visually it reduces the impact. So this looks thinner than it actually is. 11.8, and it looks it. Low profile flanks, nice curvature to the undercuts, nice large mirror polished bevels on the transitions. Visually the lugs look very slender, does look very like a Rolex Submariner Date 16610 case shape, pointed crown guards, just fantastic. This looks great from every angle. The feel good factor and the comfort level of this piece are stellar. What I like about it, second thing, is the lack of heft. One has to be magnanimous. This is a 41mm head of the piece on a 20-18 taper bracelet, and we do have a micro adjustment clasp. It does have heft on it, but surprising lack of heft. It's 150 grams exactly. You'll know this from my previous reviews. 150 grams is the sweet spot for comfort level and feel good factor, but it also gives the piece a nice feeling of heft, a nice feeling of quality. I would expect this to be circa 160 to 165 grams, because it's a 41. We're not looking at a 39 here, so one has to expect some heft, but it's pleasantly surprising. 150, and it does have a long bracelet which would fit up to an 8.5 inch wrist, but even so it's still exactly 150. So the balance of the head of the piece, the balance of the bracelet, the balance of the clasp are perfected. Citizens deserve credit, because again, this is a fundamental that many low-tier and mid-tier brands and micro-brands get incorrect. For example, they'll have a thick, slab-sided block of 3160 grade stainless steel which sits on top of the wrist, doesn't wrap around the wrist, and in 41 it adds too much meat to the piece. It's 165 grams plus. Feels like a block of 3160 grade stainless steel, and then the bracelet will have too much meat, the clasp will be too bulky, and it doesn't feel like a balanced piece. I can tell you, this is a very comfortable 41mm. Head of the piece curves around the wrist very well, sits on the wrist very well, curves around it nicely. We've got nice curvature to the top of the lugs and the undercuts. Large mirror polished bevels reduce the visual impact. And although it does have a tall, aggressive gear tooth bezel, rather like a CWC RN diver, it is very flat and low profile. Had they used the box top pack crystal, that would have added 2mm of thickness. Had they used a double dome sapphire crystal, that would have added 1.5mm, and that would have brought it up to 13, far too thick. 11.8 is correct. Flat case back, flat sapphire crystal, and it's very low profile as a result. So feel good factor and comfort level of this piece are fantastic. And it's for a 41mm, it actually wears more like a 40. Visually it does remind me of my 16610 somewhere on a date. It looks like it. The case shape, pointed crown guards, and the large mirror polished bevels on the transitions. It's just great looking. And one could argue subjectively 20mm lug width looks better than 22 because of course the bracelet is slimmer at the lugs, and again that reduces the visual impact. So just a fantastic looking piece. Comfort level is good. 150 grams, 11.8 is low profile. Now Lug-to-lug is also good. 47.4 is relatively compact for a 41mm. So to remind you, 48mm is the perfect sweet spot. I often refer to it in my previous reviews because 48 Lug-to-lug is the sweet spot. It fits 6 to 7 inch wrists and 7 to 8 inch wrists respectively. That's why it's industry standard for 39, 40 and 41 cases. 47.4 is marginally below it. It's only 0.6mm below the 48 sweet spot. And you can see on my large 8-inch wrist, we don't have a large abhorrent gap beneath the tips of the lugs. And even though it's in a male end-link piece versus female pivoted end-link, the fit is surprisingly snug for the end-link in the flat link bracelet. So the fit is very good on my 8-inch wrist. I'm actually confident even on a 6 to 7-inch wrist, the 47.6 lug-to-lug would fit well. But ideally, at 41mm, this is clearly best suited to a larger 7 to 8 inch plus wrist size, but that's a given. We're not looking at a 39 here. 41 does have some heft to it. So what I like about it is the vintage aesthetic. The aluminium bezel inserts and the aggressive gear tooth profile bezel does make this look like a military issued or a tool watch piece. This is a credible dive piece, a real tool watch. And I like everything about it. I like the aggressive look of the bezel, the aluminium bezel insert, which makes it look 1980s or 1990s. And also, I like the aggressive profiling to the case and also the flat link bracelet. The flat link bracelet makes a pleasant, refreshing change from the default option of an oyster style bracelet or Jubilee style bracelet or beads of rice style, which are the other industry standards. The alternatives, the flat link bracelet does add some interest to it, beautiful luster to it. Just a great looking piece. So comfort level is surprisingly good for a 41. Feels more like a 40, looks more like a 40. Proportions are excellent and Citizen really deserve credit. 150 grams and 11.8 is just a really good heft and also a really good thickness for the piece. Right, so I'll just put back on my Concord 40 and then we'll do a lume test. So this uses C3 Super Luminova on the lume pip, on the aluminium bezel inserts, the applied indices and also the handset. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so that's now fully charged, and as you can see, it has not disappointed. We're clearly looking at 5 to 6 layers on the lume pip, on the aluminium bezel inserts, 5 to 6 layers on the applied indices, 5 to 6 layers on the handset. What I like about it is the double applied indices on the dial make the orientation easy to read. You can clearly identify where 12 is immediately. In daylight, there's a perfect colour tone match between the lume pip, the applied indices and the handset. In the dark, there's a slight colour tone mismatch because you can see the lume pip on the bezel inserts has a darker green tone to it. It's slightly different to the dial and hands. Now, I think that's down to more layers being applied in the 3 places, bezel, dial and hands respectively. I think they've used the same C3, but I think the lume pip has an additional layer because you can see it's glowing in a different green tone. But application is good, and of course one has to be magnanimous because if you look at the syringe hour hand, you can see it is skeletonized, so it's not fully loomed as per a sword hand used on a mill sub, for example. The arrowhead style minute hand is fully loomed, but the hour hand, which is syringe style, is skeletonized, but we've got a full 5 to 6 layers in all 3 places and nice even green tone, and there's no colour tone mismatch between the dial and hands. The indices are 5 to 6, the handset is 5 to 6. The green tone of the lume pip is slightly different, but I think that's down to an additional layer, which I'm not going to be critical of because it actually enhances performance. But we're clearly looking at 5 to 6 on the dial, 5 to 6 on the hands. What I like is we're not looking at the production cost cutting measure of, for example, 2 to 3 layers on the dial and 3 to 4 layers on the hands. This is definitely a 5 to 6 in all 3 places. Potency of the exciter is strong. Longevity is good. Even application, nice large area, both on the syringe hour hand and the arrowhead minute hand. Fantastic legibility. And even to the right of the date complication, the date window, which is white, we've got a small index. So they've done a good job of it. And one has to appreciate it's an asymmetrical dial versus symmetrical, because we do have a date complication. But quality of the C3 is good. I regard it as equal to the quality of Seiko Lume Bright, used on the 5KX and also the SKX007. That's the level of performance we're looking at. It's clearly 5 to 6 layers of superluminova and equal to Lume Bright. And I like the green tone. It gives it a vintage aesthetic, because green C3 is rather like tritium, which was used in the 1980s and 1990s, and then of course tritium was succeeded by luminova and then later superluminova. And C3 are now, and BGW9 are now the industry standard for superluminova. But green C3 does visually look similar to tritium, which of course was radioactive. But I like the green tone of it. That's the point I'm making. It gives the piece a 1980s aesthetic. Excellent. Stellar performance at this price point, €475. Right, so let's discuss the movement use, because it's one of my favourite aspects of the piece. So this is powered by the Citizen Caliber E16800M Eco Drive quartz, which is made in Japan. It's a reliable, well-proven workhorse Eco Drive quartz. It's used in a plethora of Citizen pieces in their Promaster series. 0 joules, has hacking, which works well, as I've demonstrated. Quick set date complication works well. What I like about it is 180-day power reserve, which is 6 months. So, to clarify what that means is, this is powered by light. It's charged up by light. The benefit of that is you do not need to change a battery. So, for example, with a standard quartz, such as the Miyota 2115 used in the Casio Joro, that has a battery life of 2 to 3 years. So, every 3 years, you need to change the battery. With this Citizen Promaster Eco Drive diver, you don't need to change the battery. When it's fully charged, this will last for 180 days, which is 6 months of battery life. And that's without charging. So from fully charged, you get a full 6 months of battery life. And all you need to do is simply expose it to light, and then it charges up again. The other thing I like about it is it has a battery discharge indicator. So what does that mean? Well, in simple terms, if you look at the second hand, you can see it now ticks 1 tick every second, as one would expect. When the battery is low on power, the battery discharge indicator works. And what that means is it makes the second hand tick every 2 seconds rather than ticking 1 tick every second. So when you see the second hand begin to tick every 2 seconds, it indicates the power reserve is low, and therefore you need to charge it with light once again, back up to its 180 days or 6 months of battery life. So that's very useful, because you never have an uncertainty about, is it going to run out of power? For example, are you coming to the end of the 180 days or 6 months battery life? Because when you see the second hand begin to tick every 2 seconds, that tells you need to add more charge to it, more light. So it works very well, very practical, very easy, very intuitive. Above all else, what I like about this is the accuracy of it. Plus or minus 0.5 seconds per month accuracy. Just think about that for a moment. That's not 0.5 seconds per day or per week. 0.5 seconds per month accuracy is better than plus or minus 1 second per day. And I can confirm this one is running consistently at 0 seconds, plus or minus 0 seconds per day accuracy. It's stellar. It's highly accurate. And of course, one has the benefit of that 6 month battery life. The other thing I like about it is this piece is shock resistant. And it has to meet the criteria of being shock resistant for ISO 6425, and therefore, as well as the 200 meters of water resistance, then it is allowed to have Divers 200M printed on the dial. And I'll just move the hand out of the way so you can see it better. So to remind you, just like the Seiko SKX007, that also met the criteria for ISO 6425, it's 200 meters, and Seiko were allowed to print Divers 200M. Citizen are also allowed to print it. So it's not just as simple as making the piece 200 meters water resistant with a screw down case back and screw down crown. It also needs to be shock resistant in order to meet ISO 6425. So part of that shock resistant specification is the use of the Citizen Caliber E16800M Eco Drive quartz, because the quartz is of course shock resistant, more shock resistant than a mechanical movement such as a manual wind or an automatic, such as the NH35A or NH38 for example. So that's the benefits of it. It's a shock resistant quartz, as well as being long power reserve, 6 months, and also accurate at plus or minus 0.5 seconds per month. So fantastic, technically excellent, well proven. and used in a plethora of Promaster pieces. I like everything about it. Quick set complication works well, hacking works well, setting the time feels smooth, and the screw down crown is silky smooth. It's sublime, so no negatives to it whatsoever. Above all else, I like that it's thin, and of course, as I've detailed, Citizen have fully optimised or maximised the benefits of the thin calibre, because this piece is only 11.8, even though it's 200 metres. So it's thin and of course lightweight, and this piece is only 150 grams, even though it's 41mm. So it's the correct choice of calibre for this movement. The E16800M is a reliable, well-proven workhorse Eco quartz made in Japan. So last, I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch on my channel, the watch has to meet two criteria. It needs to be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price points. So low tier piece, low tier is €0 to €500. This is €475 respectively. So therefore we're at the upper end of the low tier. Yes, I'm going to declare it excellent quality, and yes, I'm going to declare it excellent value at €475. It's a fantastic piece. I like everything about it. The feel-good factor and comfort level are fantastic. 150 grams exactly. 11.8, it's very low profile for a 41mm. No quality control defects whatsoever. Bezel execution is fantastic. Screw down crown execution is silky smooth. Eco drive with 6 months of power reserve, plus or minus 0.5 seconds per month. It's very accurate. And the quality of the finishing to the bezel, head of the piece, crown, bracelet and clasp are fantastic. This is a very well made piece, and this really is a piece that gives credit to Citizen, releasing the first Promaster in 1989. They've been making Promaster pieces for the last 36 years. One has that brand heritage backing up the piece. And above all else, what adds value to this piece is the 5-year international warranty. So to remind you, low tier, typically one sees 12 months. Mid tier, typically one sees 2 years. High tier, over €10,000, such as Rolex, 5 years is industry standard. To see 5 years of international warranty on a low tier piece costing €475 is unprecedented, and Citizen really deserve credit for that. 5 years of warranty does add value to the piece. 36 years of Promaster heritage also adds value. So that really does give it excellent quality and excellent value criteria met. I'm going to declare it a champagne watch for lemonade money. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Citizen Promaster Eco Drive Diver, reference BN0261-51E. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you for watching.